What would make Prince William, a man trained from birth to control every public emotion, break his composure inside a royal council session in front of his father, his stepmother, and his mother's brother simultaneously? The answer reportedly arrived in a sealed file. If you really want to know what happened, stay until the very end. Make sure you hit the subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. You genuinely do not want to miss where this story goes. Now let us get into it. William had entered the palace council expecting a difficult discussion about transition planning, the private process through which royal duties, staff access, and ceremonial responsibilities prepare to pass from one monarch to the next. He did not expect what reportedly happened instead. According to accounts from those familiar with the gathering, Charles Spencer rose from his seat, pushed a sealed file toward Camilla, and accused her of signing what he described as a secret crown continuity pact, a private agreement reportedly designed to grant her advisory access to succession planning, senior palace appointments, and transition briefings during the first year of William's future reign, all without the future king's knowledge or approval. William reportedly stared at the document in silence. He asked his uncle to repeat the final clause. Spencer did. The future king lowered his head as one thought reportedly settled over him with the force of something he had feared for years but never wanted confirmed. Another arrangement had been built around him without him. Camilla remained seated. Her grip tightened around the chair, by accounts from those familiar with her response. She looked toward Charles. The king watched her face and said nothing, and that silence, according to those present, sharpened Spencer's anger faster than any accusation could have. Diana's brother had not come to the council to manage the situation carefully. He had come because he believed William was once again discovering a family secret in public, the same pattern that had defined so much of his mother's pain inside this institution. Spencer then placed a second paper beside the pact. He explained it came from an archival account attached to the agreement and carried 3 sets of initials. Charles saw one set and changed instantly, according to accounts from those familiar with the moment. His jaw tightened. William noticed. Camilla noticed. Nobody explained why. William pushed his chair back. He reminded everyone present that he had asked directly whether anything concerning his succession was being kept from him. He looked at his father. He looked at Camilla. He wanted a clear answer. None came. His composure broke. Spencer stopped him before he reached the door. Diana's brother said the pact had not begun with Camilla's signature. A private gathering months earlier had started everything, and one person already in that room knew the full truth. William had believed he had just discovered Camilla's secret. The faces around that table told him something worse. The pact had a history, and every person in the room carried a different reason to fear what that history contained. The argument in that council room was never only about a document. For William, it reached the deepest wound of his adult life, the fear that decisions were still being made around him rather than with him, that the institution he was preparing to lead still operated on the assumption that protecting him from information was preferable to trusting him with it. For Camilla, the pact represented something more personal than political ambition. It represented survival inside a family that had never fully released its complicated history, and the fear that when William eventually held full authority, she might be removed before she had the chance to withdraw with dignity on her own terms. For Charles, the pact threatened the fragile peace he had spent years constructing at significant personal cost, a peace built on the belief that if the sharpest edges of the family's tensions could be kept from colliding directly, the institution would hold. And for Diana's brother, silence had already cost too much once before. Spencer had watched hidden conversations isolate his sister inside the very institution that was supposed to protect her. He had convinced himself that exposing the pact before the council would protect her son from the same pattern. William's anger in that corridor told him something harsher. The confrontation had not protected anyone. It had reopened the exact wound Spencer had walked in hoping to shield. In a quiet corridor outside the council room, William pressed both hands against the table and told his uncle directly, according to accounts from those familiar with the exchange, that he had needed truth, not protection through secrecy. Spencer absorbed those words in silence. The prince asked why his uncle had waited until the council meeting to reveal what he knew. Spencer admitted he had wanted witnesses present because he feared the file might otherwise disappear into private handling before anyone outside the family understood what it contained. William heard the reasoning. He did not accept it as justification. Months before the council confrontation, there had been no shouting, no public scandal, and no dramatic announcement. There was only a Windsor gathering, a shortened guest list, and one conversation held after the ceremonial doors had closed. William had attended that evening believing it concerned standard transition planning. Charles sat nearby. Camilla remained composed. Household custodians, officials responsible for protecting royal duties and operations during sudden change, reviewed emergency royal protocols. The continuity ceremony examined how staff access and ceremonial responsibilities would survive a future transition. The prince believed he was being prepared, not bypassed. William left before the administrative session ended. He had been told the remaining discussion concerned staff retention and ceremonial scheduling, matters where Camilla's household responsibilities gave her a natural reason to remain. The future king accepted that explanation. The queen consort did not call him back. Charles did not stop him. That silence mattered later. At 10:40 that evening, Camilla sat inside Windsor's oak anteroom when a senior transition custodian reportedly warned her that William could remove an entire layer of experienced advisors after becoming king. The warning was preserved, according to sources familiar with the documented meeting account attached to the draft, in a record of that private discussion. She answered, and her words reportedly changed the temperature of the room immediately. She said continuity must be written down before emotion decides everything. Within minutes, the discussion moved from preparation to written protection. The structure of the Crown Continuity Pact began that night. Charles entered later and found Camilla reading the early draft. She told the king she feared becoming a symbol to be erased rather than a person permitted to withdraw with dignity. He took her hand. The monarch heard the fear in her voice and never told William what had begun. Weeks later, William asked his father directly whether transition agreements were being prepared without his involvement. Charles replied that nothing was being designed to diminish his future authority. The answer was technically accurate. It also avoided mentioning the unfinished pact entirely. Spencer later traced the first draft through a personal archival review. Diana's brother found, according to accounts from those familiar with his research, that one custodian had placed a copy inside a private family file after concluding the wording had crossed from continuity planning into something closer to protected influence. The documented account gave him the sentence, the time, and the room. Camilla had initiated the pact. Charles had known enough to question it. William had been kept outside both. When the council reconvened, Charles Spencer did not sit down. William returned pale but controlled, according to accounts from those familiar with the scene. Camilla waited with the document closed before her. Then Diana's brother moved his chair aside, turned directly toward the queen consort, and delivered the sentence that reportedly shattered every remaining layer of royal restraint in the room. He told her not to explain the pact to the council. He told her to look at William and answer him directly. For the first time, the pact became painfully personal rather than procedural. Spencer refused to allow formal palace procedure to absorb the confrontation. Aides had been prepared to summarize the agreement's technical terms, but he insisted the reckoning remain between the people whose trust had actually been damaged. Technical wording could not explain why William had been excluded from a document built around his own future. The prince crossed the room and sat opposite Camilla rather than beside Charles. The king noticed the movement immediately. His son had created visible distance from both of them simultaneously. Spencer pushed the sealed file toward Camilla and asked whether she had believed William was too emotionally compromised to control his own future household. The queen consort looked directly at the future king. She said no. Then she said something that reportedly stopped the room. She told him she had believed he might remove everyone connected to a life he wanted to leave behind. William's expression changed. His voice broke as he asked one question. Everyone, did you mean yourself? Camilla did not hide behind the document. She admitted her fear had been personal. She believed William might one day erase her remaining royal role before she could step away with dignity. The prince listened, but the confession deepened his pain rather than easing it. He had spent years proving he could separate private emotion from public duty. She had built a secret protection around the fear that he could not. Spencer then unfolded a handwritten note preserved in the documented Windsor account and read Camilla's own words back into the room. The sentence about continuity being written down before emotion decides everything. William immediately understood whose emotion that word had been describing. His future judgment, his grief, his past. Camilla admitted the wording had been wrong. She refused to apologize for fearing exclusion. Then she disclosed, through her own recorded account of the Windsor discussion, that Charles had seen the early draft. The king had not destroyed it. He had asked for one clause to be softened. William turned slowly toward his father. Charles did not look away. The pact was no longer Camilla's secret alone. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment below right now with the words "I am still here." Let us see who is genuinely following this story all the way through. And if this kind of deep royal coverage is what you come to this channel for, hit that like button right now. It helps more people find the royal pulse. Now, here is where the story reaches its most devastating turning point. Kings are often judged by the orders they give. Charles was now being judged by the one he never gave. The Crown Continuity Pact could not legally alter succession, remove William's future sovereignty, or bind a reigning monarch against his constitutional authority. But it could shape the people surrounding a transition, and Charles had reportedly known enough to stop it before it ever reached a signature. Instead, he had tried to soften its language. In doing so, he protected one evening of peace and created a far larger betrayal. The king removed his glasses and folded them carefully, according to accounts from those familiar with the exchange. He admitted he had seen enough of the draft to stop it. He said he feared telling William because every discussion involving Camilla and future authority became personal too quickly. The monarch had convinced himself that softening the pact would prevent another family rupture. He had chosen quiet compromise over a painful confrontation. William barely raised his voice in response. The prince told his father that he had not prevented the rupture. He had delayed it until the betrayal became larger. The calmness in those words, by accounts from those present, frightened Charles more than anger would have. The king looked at his son and understood that William was no longer asking why the pact existed. He was judging why his father had allowed it to survive. Charles then disclosed the detail reportedly preserved in his own documented review notes. He had personally demanded the removal of a clause guaranteeing Camilla a permanent place at private sovereign briefings, the confidential meetings where a monarch receives sensitive counsel. Yet he had allowed the one-year advisory provision to remain. Camilla turned toward him. She had believed her husband defended the pact. She now learned he had quietly weakened the protections she thought he supported. Even he had doubted it. William asked for the signed version. Spencer placed it before him. The future king did not tear it apart. He simply lifted the file and requested 1 hour alone. Camilla watched him leave and reportedly feared his silence more than any fury could have prepared her for. William did not shout when he returned. That was what unsettled everyone most. He carried the pact beneath one arm, entered the council chamber, and placed it in the center of the table with deliberate, almost painful care. Camilla searched his expression for anger. Charles searched for forgiveness. Spencer searched for evidence that his intervention had caused more damage than it had repaired. Then the prince announced 3 immediate decisions. The first concerned his future reign. William stated that no private framework affecting the crown he would one day inherit would be recognized without his direct participation. Transition documents, plans designed to guide duties and staff during a change of monarch, would be reviewed with him present whenever they contained advisory powers. Hidden influence could shape his first decisions before he had even made them. Trust broken around succession could poison every advisor standing beside him when he most needed them. The second decision ordered the Crown Continuity Pact suspended from all internal planning immediately. He did not destroy it. William wanted every clause traced and every person involved in its drafting identified before any final judgment was reached. Camilla heard that her transition access had been suspended. She slowly reached into her handbag, removed her council access card, placed it beside the pact, and said she would not force him to remove her twice. Her hand trembled as she pulled it away. Charles reached toward the card, but stopped. The king looked at Camilla with immediate regret. She refused to meet his eyes. She felt exposed by the husband who had weakened the pact in secret and by the stepson who now controlled whether any part of it survived. The monarch wanted to speak. He could find no words sufficient for the moment. William's third decision turned toward Spencer. The future king ordered Diana's brother to surrender his private copy of the document and provide a full, documented account of how he had obtained it. Spencer stared at him. The prince made his position clear. One act of secrecy would not be excused simply because it had exposed another. Spencer agreed. Then he disclosed one final detail from the archival chain. A note written after the Windsor meeting recorded that Camilla herself had questioned the Pact's most aggressive clause before the document reached its final form. William went still. He looked at her differently, and he asked Camilla to meet him alone that evening. No Charles, no Spencer, no counsel. There were no advisors present, no sealed files on the table, no king seated between them. William arrived first and remained standing until Camilla entered alone. For several seconds, according to accounts from those familiar with the exchange, neither of them spoke. Then the prince asked a question far simpler than anything raised before the council. Were you afraid of me? Camilla's answer carried no constitutional language, no prepared defense, and no polished royal restraint. Yes, she said, and suddenly the entire conflict changed shape. William told her the pact had wounded him because it confirmed an old fear, that people studied his grief and his emotional history before trusting his judgment. That fear mattered because a future king could not lead confidently while wondering whether private protections were being quietly constructed around assumptions about his pain. Camilla listened before answering. She admitted she believed William might one day look at every advisor connected to Charles's marriage and see only reminders of Diana. She had feared becoming a symbol of old suffering before she had the chance to withdraw with dignity. She had not feared losing a throne. She had feared being erased from the final chapter of a life she had spent years trying to stabilize. William's eyes filled, according to accounts from those familiar with the conversation. He told her the secrecy had created the very reaction she feared. His mother had lived through conversations held beyond her reach, and he could not begin his own reign through the same pattern. Camilla lowered her voice. For the first time, she understood why the pact had struck him as more than political interference. Then she disclosed, through the private handwritten objection she had sent after signing, that she had personally challenged the clause covering senior advisor retention. She admitted she had never shown William the note because she feared any approach from her would be interpreted as further manipulation. William confirmed that Spencer's archival record supported her account. The documented evidence did not excuse the secret agreement, but it changed one crucial truth. The prince no longer believed Camilla had deliberately planned to control his crown. William offered one path forward. She would renounce every secret advisory guarantee before the full council. In return, he would state publicly that she had attempted to amend the pact before its exposure. Camilla accepted without bargaining. For the first time, William and Camilla left a room understanding the same truth. By morning, the palace's private crisis had reached the outside world. The details circulating publicly were incomplete, but the emotional image they formed was irresistible. Diana's brother challenging Camilla before a royal council, while William reportedly broke beneath the weight of a hidden agreement built around his future reign. Britain did not receive the full pact. It received something more powerful, a story about secrecy, inheritance, and an old family wound returning at the exact moment the monarchy was trying to present itself as looking forward. Charles understood the danger before the first palace statement was released. Officials confirmed that an internal transition framework had been suspended and placed under review, meaning a private plan concerning the transfer of royal duties was no longer operational while its terms were examined. They refused to publish family documents or disclose the details of the council discussion. That silence mattered because the public could see William's pain, but not the full reasons behind it. Attention moved quickly from Camilla's signature to Charles's knowledge of the draft. The king had known. He had chosen softening over stopping. And now the country was drawing its own conclusions about what that choice revealed. William watched the first morning coverage alone. He remained still until one commentator compared his breakdown to Diana's isolation within royal life. He turned off the television and told an aide, according to accounts from those familiar with the exchange, that his mother's pain would not become entertainment inside his own crisis. Camilla stayed behind closed doors as Charles asked whether she wanted a stronger palace defense. She refused. She told the king that William deserved to have the truth heard before she received any protection. Charles looked at her differently in that moment. For once, she was choosing exposure over silence, and he understood what that cost her. The final council meeting began without accusation. Camilla stood before William, Charles, and Diana's brother, and placed her council access card on the table for the second time. Then she did what fear had prevented her from doing months earlier. She spoke plainly. She renounced every private advisory guarantee contained in the Crown Continuity Pact. She admitted that secrecy had made her fear look like ambition. She accepted that William's future reign could not begin beneath an agreement he had never approved. She did not ask for sympathy. The council permanently removed the pact from all transition planning. No advisory guarantee survived. No protected consultation remained. No influence over staff retention continued. William could no longer inherit a future shaped by agreements made before he entered the room. The future king then set a new principle. Any framework affecting a future sovereign must include that person directly, provide written reasons, and never hide family decisions behind ceremonial language. Trust could not survive if truth only arrived after discovery forced it into the open. Charles lowered his head. The king admitted he had tried to protect Camilla while avoiding conflict with his son, and that his silence had betrayed them both. He accepted responsibility without asking for forgiveness. Spencer stepped forward next. Diana's brother handed over his private copy and apologized for exposing the pact in a way that caused William public pain. The future king listened, then embraced his uncle briefly. Truth had been necessary. The method had still wounded him. William finally turned toward Camilla. He said her fear did not excuse the pact, but her handwritten objection proved she had not been planning to seize his crown. She had made a different mistake. She had searched for protection through secrecy instead of trust. Then William picked up her surrendered access card. He placed it inside the closed pact file, shut the cover, and handed everything to the council secretary for permanent withdrawal. No humiliation, no revenge, just an ending. The breakdown had changed him. Camilla lost her secret guarantees. Charles accepted the cost of silence. Spencer exposed the truth and stepped back. William emerged wounded but clearer, determined to honor Diana not through vengeance, but by ending the family habit of hiding decisions until discovery forced confession. The secret pact was finished. The council had spoken, and William walked away with no hidden agreement governing his future. Only the painful certainty that his reign would begin exactly where the old silence had finally ended. If this video gave you something real, hit the like button. Subscribe to this channel. Drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you are watching from and what your time is at right now. And give us your honest take. Do you think William handled this the right way? Or did the pact reveal something about Camilla that trust alone cannot repair? Every comment gets read on this channel. We will see you in the next one.